And welcome back. This is your bro. You rocks in the house. Once again, we're talking about the family compact. We did review, we have a couple of bros here. William Henry Lambton, right? So we saw a bit of what his family, his background is all about. And of course, bring us back up to this bro here, John Lambton, right? The first Earl of Durham. So what is his connection, or what are these folks all about in regards to when it comes to learning, as I'll just put you here, learning about the family compact. So the small group of close men and the family compact emerged from the wars. At the end of its lifespan, the compact would be condemned by Lord Durham. So we saw what he was all about, right? So he seemed to be somebody, a leading Whig who summarized its grip on power. Fortified by family connection, I guess this is the way this connection and the common interest felt by all who held and all who desired subordinate offices, that the party was thus erected into and a solid and permanent power controlled by no responsibility, subject to no serious change, exercising over the whole government of the province, an authority utterly dependent of the people and its representatives, and possessing the only means of influencing either the government at home or the colonial representative of the crown. Okay, so they have their etymology here. Thomas Dalton described as the ruling class in Kingston, Ontario, as all one family compacted unto. The term family compact appeared in a letter written by Marshall Spring Bidwell. Look at his here, right? To William Warren Baldwin, right? Yeah, all right. Businessman. So you probably see a lot of these streets, but these are the people. So Baldwin in 1828, family did not mean relations by marriage, but rather a close brotherhood. And of course, Lord Durham noted in 1839 there is, in truth, very little of family connection among the persons thus united. The phrase was popularized by one of our favorite guys. We're going to so do this one. William Lyon Mackenzie, right? He was one of, in 1833, he, as ugly as he was a Scottish Canadian American journalist and politician, right? So gentlemanly capitalism and British colonialism. So the historians in general have emphasized that the British Empire at the mid 19th century represented the extension abroad of the institutions and principles entrenched at home. Upper Canada created in the very image and transcript of the British Constitution, but is but one example. Like the United Kingdom, the Constitution of Upper Canada was established on the mixed monarchy. So if you know about Canadian history, well, Canada is a uh, British town, or like British country, right? British lands. Prior to that, it was New France, and of course, that's when Jacques Cartier and Maisonneuve made it up there. But of course, the British messed that all up, and yeah, this is pretty much up until the War of 1812, especially when America was getting ready to become America. Canada, if I'm correct, became its own in what we call a Confederation of 1867. Long story short. So what I'm trying to find out here is the constitutional context. So the context of the family, and once again, we're doing this to figure out how does this relate today. So we hear about WEF, and we hear about, which is WEF, and you hear about, well, you wonder, how is it our politicians could have been hijacked, or in some cases, how could we have been infiltrated by forces out there? And in fact, it's nothing new. That's why when folks are freaking out about world order and all that, this stuff goes back way back. So the constitutional context, Upper Canada did not have a hereditary nobility. In its place, senior members of Upper Canada bureaucracy, the Executive Council of Upper Canada, don't forget, this is back in the days, and Legislative Council of Upper Canada made up the elite of the compact. These men sought to solidify their personal positions into family dynasties and acquire all the marks of gentility. They use their government positions to extend their businesses and speculative interests. The origins of the family compact lay in overlapping appointments made to the executive and legislative Council of Upper Canada. Yada, 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 yada. So, in a nutshell, these were the folks who were part of it, right? Look, the membership was York, later named Toronto. See, this is Toronto old school, and this is how it looks today. The capital. Its most important member was Bishop John Strahan. Look at him. He looks pregnant right here. Remember I told you about the reverse, reverse, inverse, reverse? Here you go. First notable figure in Upper Canada and first Anglican Bishop of Toronto. What's he doing in that? Anyway, I digress. Many of the other members were his former students, wink, wink, nudge, or people who were related to him, wink, wink, nudge, right? The most prominent of Strahan, if I'm pronouncing correct, pupils were Sir John Beverly Robinson. Look at him. He looked like a Q-tip. He's probably a Negro for all we know, eh? Because a lot of those Negroes used to, you call them plain white, but you never know. All right, John Beverly Robinson, first baronet, was a lawyer judge, considered the leader, as they say in Quebecois, the leader. C'est toi le leader, the leader of the family compact, la famille compacte, a group of family which affected. So this nigga over here was the main one. He was a lawyer and a judge and a political figure. Why is he so important? Let's find out. So, as we see here, Sir John Robinson, yeah, baronet, Robinson baronets. Who's his mama? Born to who? Son of Christopher Robinson. No, a United Empire Lawyers and the First Families of Virginia. So there you go. I bet you learned something there today, right? Because Christopher Robinson, right? American born soldier, yeah, all of this business, very well known. So this bro, for some reason, he runs this stuff, right? Who was from 1829, Chief Justice of Upper Canada, right? Once again, part of the British Canada established in 1791 by the Kingdom of Great Britain, right? All the way up. Central third of the lands in British North America, formerly part of the province of Quebec since 1763. And then up until, of course, our Confederation, it became Canada. So
That's interesting. John Beverly Robinson's brother is part of the reason that I am here. Because he was the brother was responsible for arranging transportation out of Ireland
mhm.
for a certain limited people who won the right to come to Canada, and he negotiated with the British government, with Canada, certain privileged people from Ireland selling out of Cork who landed in Peterborough to keep Canada for Canadians and keep it insulated from being overtaken by the Americans. An important part of my history.
And is it by relatives also?
My the person's name is Allen family in Peterborough, and that was my mother's maiden name. So the Robinson family was an important part being Canadian. First of all, he was one of the people who established that.
Wow. So you got some. So you've seen some roots.
I'm seeing family. I'm seeing family.
Nice. So this is like your great uncle per se.
That would be uncle.
Yeah, you almost look like him. So, folks, if you want to know how Nom de Plume Poirier photography, he looks just like this bro here, just like him, right? Ghost white, as I like to say. If you ever have to, because you always say black white, it's like, well, how white is white? You either have ghost white or tan white, right? No. Or we could actually have a new one. Call it Q-tip white. How about that? Yes, so this guy looks Q-tip white. There we go. So who was from 1829? So your family, Upper Canada, 34 years. The rest of the members were mostly descendants of the United Empire Loyalists. Watch out for those niggers. Look at these guys. Look at them. They thought they were the shit. United Empire Loyalists is an honorific. It should be pronounced horrific, but honorific title, which was given to the first Lord Dorchester, the governor of Quebec. See, I told you Quebec had something to do with it, and the governor general of the Canadas, to American loyalists. Study this language, folks, especially you wicked Negroes and precious white folk out there. The language, the governor of Quebec and governor general of the Canadas to American loyalists who resettled in British North America during or after the American Revolution. So that's the history. That's not so long ago. That's at least maybe what? You're talking about maybe five great grandparents. So if you want to talk about white privilege, here's the thing. You're not connected to that history, even if it be by the slavery and all of that thing. But I believe one of the best, most common arguments these days, when we're talking about the GI Bill. You work all your life. Now, if you had been a part of the war generation when you fought, we know in the United States the GI Bill took care of most of the, not the, all the white soldiers who came back. The black soldiers were not, they didn't get the GI Bill. And then you had the, what you call the redlining.
They didn't have the GI Bill working in their favor.
Not at all. Not at all. That's why, and I like how you didn't know that. So if you tell somebody, even at your age today, that reality would be, even though I'm 20 years younger, it's still pertinent to my growing up throughout the, let's say for some of us, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. And our children, who are even more removed from that, who grew up in the privilege that we had, because I grew up privileged. I can't, here's the thing, any black person who says they're not, there's a, you got to really have discernment. The thing is, even though the African American soldiers did not get the benefits of GI, that not having a home, pretty much like Allentown, and I believe they called another place which is Levitville, that area that was created for families, that they called the nuclear family, right? And that was created for the white man. Now, a lot of the African Americans since then, and once again, digress to the fact that Red Summers happened, 1919, Black Wall Street, right? These were done still by people, but the African American could not join the fight in the war. It was actually in World War II they started to say, and maybe if not before because you had the Confederacy, right? But they still didn't, not until what's his name? The guy with the bomb, Truman, if I'm correct. Or Eisenhower. Was it Eisenhower, Truman? It goes like that. Eisenhower, Truman?
Truman made decisions.
So when we talk about today, and I'm bringing this up, and once again to the family compact, because this is how far it goes, though, right? You could be related to somebody from there. Your maybe grandchildren will not have anything remotely close to having the privilege. But it still is relevant because even up until the 1940s, the Second World War, let's say if my parents were boomers or whatnot who had grown up in that era in Canada, that wasn't the case, but grew up in that, I would have been disenfranchised by the time I was born. And by then, whoever the powers were, they made sure to it. So when we talk about privilege, it's correct. Everybody is actually under some type of oppression. However, that's just by that's not it's by design also by the government, so they're screwing it not only people of color but whites also, but you're just starting to catch up to the reality of what's already been for people like myself. So I just threw that out there as a segue because once again it starts off with the powers that be, right? And then because and even then if you're talking when you were never intended to count, we were never intended to be included, as we see. So, just going back to this, the rest of the members, of course, were mostly descendants of, yes, the United Empire loyalists and or recent upper class British settlers, British settlers such as the Bolton family. All right, what's his name? Bolton. Isn't that singer? What's his name? The jazz singer. I forget his name. But the
Michael Bolton?
yeah, Michael Bolton, right? Right? You never know. Builders of the Grange. So this is a very well-known area in Toronto, right? Historic Gregorian manor. So Canada is very old blood. So these folks here, okay, John Henry Bolton, as we mentioned, Judge Jonas Jones, right? Being married to collectively they're extended. So all of these folks, became the members of the family compact. So as you see once again, you've got your uncle here, Bishop Strahan, a bishop, William Osgood, Jonas Jones, Sir Alan Napier, William Henry Bolton, Colonel James Fitzgibbon, and Innes Shaw. So these are the guys who started this stuff, and Sir James Buchanan and Henry Sherwood.
The interesting part is that those names are still current as far as description of Toronto. So the family compact lives on. At least historically, their name is well recognized locally.
Well, you see here, to add to what you're saying, levels of power. In the absence of a landed elite, these men believe that the law should be the basis of social preeminence, bound by the ideals of public service and the spirit of loyalty to king, church, empire, solidified in the crucible war of the War of 1812, right? And they use the Law Society of Upper Canada, and that is the law society responsible for the self-regulation of lawyers and paralegals in the Canadian province of Ontario, founded in 1797 as the Law Society of Upper Canada, changed by recently. So as a means of regulating entry into elite positions of power. So just and once again, this is for all you guys for out there who follow the show to to read up on it. I'm not going to read all of it, but this is how we see that influence went right through, even until the Law Society and Juvenile Advocate Society. Look, created in 1797. I'm not going to go through all, right? I'm going to cherry pick. Every treasurer of the society before 1841 was a member of the family compact. The control that the family compact exerted over the legal profession and corruption that resulted was clearly demonstrated in the Types Riot of 1826, in which the printing press of William Lyon Mackenzie was destroyed by the young lawyers of the Juvenile Advocate Society, with the complicity of the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and the Magistrate of Toronto. And this is why I wanted to really take a look into this. We saw what happened in the last 3 years when we were under lockdown. We also experienced, and then take a second here, because the show could get deep, and even though we do ramble on, like I said, it's to find a nugget in the mundane. What I'm just coming to realize, this type of control is what we experienced 3 years ago. Because inevitably, we see, and this is an argument that I will pick on in future episodes. One of the things that bothered me, and of course, my history is I did work as we call personal support worker, internal medicine visitor, along with some of our great hospitals. And I could still be baffled as to understand how is it certain things are locked in, if you understand how I'm talking in code, legally locked in for our health. It's locked in, as I realize, as we see here, reading here, it's locked in to our law society. It's locked in even in the advocate society. It's locked in the educational society. It's locked in the pharmaceutical. It's locked in into every single web and weave, but it starts at the top. So, is it any more different today than it was then? I would say no, because our what we're living now, and back to you, Arthur. Would you say one or two things? Would you say what um, the WEF and even our government, because we understand that our Canadian government somehow, um, and once again, I would say this in code, no confirmation, but is a bedfellow to these other unelected family compacts, which we could consider now as the.
Well, it's interesting because back then, certain limited elite considered that the system worked. And to break down that system is taking humongous efforts by some people. So the system they had is um, being broken into, but it's taken now hundreds of years, hundreds of years. But there is some sense, I think you will say, some sense of progress, not as far as the elite's concerned. Um, they still exist, quote, underground.
I like the way you said that. They still exist underground. So, as far as, well, actually, as we see here, let me find out any recent. We see some citations, we see opposition, right? We did hear, once I heard type riots, once again, type riots is a sort of censorship. So I'm learning that William Lyon Mackenzie was actually a proponent of free speech, even though we didn't, under our constitution, which didn't exist, let's say, to what 1982 standards is free speech.
Well, he was a radical by those who controlled the power. Hence, they threw his printing press into Lake Ontario. So they practiced censorship.
Bam! So, in theory, once again, and once again, this is hypothetical, whatever the hell you want to call it, it's the same thing. It really hasn't. I mean, looking into what our topic here, which is the I mean, you see the Bank of Upper Canada, land and agriculture, right? Only some reform movements were opposed, and we can look into that. But the family clique, or the compact family, because it's French also, it's always about a clique, a mob, a mafia, something. But these are the folks still, somehow, even though this is a long time ago, this is very relevant today. Especially when we were locked down, especially when now that we're forced to take certain medicines to basically help ourselves. I know you want to know, also find out about the black presidents. So this is your research. As we'll be coming back after this short break, we'll be touching on the 7 black presidents before Barack Obama. So welcome back once again. This is your bro on the date. Thank you for tuning in. Just give a like, subscribe, share. You can also donate to me on one of the Patreon channels that I do have, as you'll see, and or you can buy me coffee. We are here with a guest, a boomer, who's just going to throw in a couple of words and some wisdom. We were covering the family compact. Now, I want to take a look at one question, which many folks seem to have some difficulty actually accepting, like everything else. Like, were there 7 black presidents before Barack Obama? And the fact is, yes. The people thought that Barack Obama was the first black president. He's black looking, first of all. Okay, we all got duped. We all thought he was the big savior. You see, that's what I'm saying. You can't trust all black looking folk, because we seen what Obama has done is way more heavier as things are being revealed in our history.
Okay.
This is what's happening. So, to our nom de plume, I wanted to bring up what we call proof. So, number one, John Hanson, a Moore, was actually the first black president of the United States. He served from 1781 to 1782, and he was black. The new country was actually formed on March 1st, 1781, with the adoption of the Articles of Confederation. Right? And then we're also going to pick into their family. Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States, 1801, 1809, and he was black. His mother, a half-breed Indian squaw, and his father, a mulatto, half white and half black, from Virginia. All right, he fathered numerous. So here's the thing: people are like, "Well, Thomas Jefferson, okay, so he was a slave trader, all that," but you could, at that point, because of the what we call whitening factor, it's one of those. If you want to say, "Oh, well, there were black people who did it," there's your black person, Thomas light skinned Jefferson. And it goes the same with up until we call the FBI with J. Edgar Hoover, who's very light skinned, right? We know was blatantly, as today, LGBT, NMNLP. with a twist, right? So Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States. He served from 1829 to 1837. And he was black. Ack, 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 ack. Right? His mother was a white woman from Ireland, because you know those potato famine people. Who had Andrew Jackson with a black man? A bro. You see, there were black people in Ireland and all over the world. But that's another lesson, right? So his father's other children, Andrew Jackson's stepmother, was sold into slavery. So you see how that worked? Abraham the man Lincoln. Right off the bat, you know that guy looked weird. He was the 16th president of the United States. He served from 1861 to 1865, and he was black. Ah, ah. His mother was from an Ethiopian tribe. That's why he looks so funky. You ever see his face? And his father was an African American. It was told that his father was Thomas Lincoln, a man to cover the truth, but he was sterile from childhood, mumps, and later castrated. You know what that means, right? Reverse, 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 right? Making it impossible for him to have been his father. Lincoln's nickname, Abraham Africanus the First. Shut up. William Harding, the 20th president of the United States, and he looked like the whitest one too. He served from 1921-23, and he was black. Harding never denied his ancestry. Isn't that crazy? A Republican. So, once again, have discernment when it comes to psyops, because now even with race, we learn, even though racism was invented during this Negro's time, literally invented, right? With the Rothschilds and whatnot. He probably sold out because it's known that he wasn't too popular with blacks. It's crazy, I tell you, but study. So he served from 1921-23, and he never denied it. How did he end up living during that time in 1921-23 with the Ku Klux freaking Klan, birth of a nation existing, and he didn't deny that shit? When Republican leaders called on Harding to deny his Negro history, he said, "How should I know whether or not one of my ancestors might have jumped the fence?" At least he had a sense of humor. Number six, Calvin Coolidge, 29th President of the United States. He served from 1923 to 1929. And he was black. Ack, ack, ack. He probably admitted that his mother was dark, but claimed it was because of a mixed Indian ancestry. His mother's maiden name was Moore. In Europe, the name Moore was given to all black people, just as America, the name Negro was used. And finally, Dwight E. Eisenhower, the 33rd President of the United States, serving from the 50s, 1953 to 61, and he was ack, 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 ack. His mother, Ida Elizabeth Stover Eisenhower, sounds like a Hebrew name, was an anti-war advocate, was half black. So, all you hillbillies out there and everybody's, oh, it can't be, you're going to melt, you're going to go nuts.
This 1872 print by Currier and Ives shows the first 7 black Americans elected to the United States Congress. All 7 were Republicans. From the left side of the picture, we have Hiram Revels of Mississippi. As an ordained minister, Hiram served as a missionary and pastor, recruited 3 black regiments in the Union Army, and was a chaplain during the Civil War. Revels became America's first black United States Senator. Next is Benjamin Turner of Alabama. Turner was a slave during the Civil War, but within 5 years after the Civil War, Turner became a wealthy and prosperous businessman. Next is Robert DeLarge of South Carolina. DeLarge was born a slave, but within 3 years after the Civil War, DeLarge was serving in the State House. He also chaired the Republican Party's Platform Committee and became a statewide elected official. Next is Josiah Walls of Florida. Walls was a slave during the Civil War and was forced to fight for the Confederate Army. However, after he was captured by Union troops, he immediately enlisted as a Union soldier and even became an officer. After his election to the United States Congress, his credentials were challenged by the Democrats, and he was twice sent home. Walls was reelected after the first challenge, but during the second challenge, the Democrats gained control of Florida and Walls was prevented from returning. Next is Jefferson Long of Georgia. Born as a slave, Long was self-educated and built a thriving business. However, when elected to the United States Congress as a Republican, the Democrats boycotted his business, causing him great financial losses. Long was the first black American to deliver a congressional speech in the House of the United States Congress. Next is Joseph Rainey of South Carolina. Born a slave, Rainey served briefly as Speaker of the United States House and was in Congress longer than any other black American from that era. Seventh is Robert Elliott, also of South Carolina. Elliott was well educated, reading in Spanish, French, and Latin. In Congress, Elliott led to the passage of civil rights bills over the violent opposition of congressional Democrats, and he later became Speaker of the House in the state legislature. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the first black senator and representatives of the United States of America.
So there you go. That's just a little history there for you folks. And of course, John Hanson, 1791 to 1860. He was a Liberian senator during the mid 19th century who has been erroneously claimed as the first black president. Of course, they're always going to say that sometimes, right? But erroneously, right? Of the United States, not much is known about Hanson's early life. He was born into slavery in Baltimore, and of course, according to some historians, Hanson purchased his freedom. So you can also read up on it and get to know, right? He was not George Washington, but actually the first president. And Hanson has been taught to be the dark-skinned man on the back of the $2 bill. The image on the $2 bill shows the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. So he's actually the bro. He's actually in that whole. If you ever seen that dollar, right? That money. He's actually in the signing. There's also a book. If you ever want to look up the history of John Hanson, I'll try and maybe find a PDF. But you know what? It's still valuable. It shows that the bro knew how to write. It also shows that he knew how to read. So definitely check it out. So before we wrap up the date, once again, I want to thank you for popping by and tuning in. Look, this is how. Look, this guy look Liberian to you? He's the bro. This is how they actually sell him, right? But this is how he actually looks. So much for whitewashing for you, right? But he was actually one of the amazing folks. So once again, thank you for tuning in. I'm gonna actually, because once I do go off and rattle on for almost more than an hour, I would like to get some feedback, as this is Nom de Plume, Mr. Arthur Poirier of Poirier Photography's first time coming on a blog. I know you were quite shy to want to participate in such a how can we say, a broadcast, a show. It's kind of like radio, right? Except it's online. So give us some thoughts. You've got the floor. Don't be shy. Just tell us what you think and tell us what you feel.
No longer a virgin.
Oh my. No longer a virgin. He's actually on I have a massage chair, so he's enjoying the massage chair. But overall, I mean, would you say there's hope in Canada for the future? Because, we're talking about the family compact, and it just seems that things are not the same.
We're talking about hope, and Canadians have hope, and there are some Canadians who actually are trying to construct that. You have to search for them.
Any other, per se, I mean, and I like the approach you're taking, because now you're in the retirement realm. I just wonder, though, because this too shall pass, right? Like the family compact. And there might be another, or maybe not. Maybe that'll be the end of that monopoly. But do you feel Canada can recover from this? Because once, like I had mentioned, there are things that are ingrained to our law. And this is probably the gold nugget in the show. Hear what I'm saying, folks. Things are ingrained into our law, that is basically overrides our constitutional Charter of Rights and Freedoms of 1982.
Well, that's a good point. And actually, who runs the country? And there's remnants of the compact that we're still living with.
So, is there a way? Because my biggest argument, and once again, this is the gold nugget in this show, I said, let's just throw this joke out there, hypothetically. Let's just say I'm going to call and claim myself a prisoner of war, which I have been up until the Emergency Act is officially over, which it isn't. Still, it hasn't been declared as over. I can claim exile maybe in somewhere like Africa because our laws have, once again, overlooked. Some folks, like the compact, said, listen, we're going to follow what who says what, right? Who says what? And so much so that we bought from what pharma folk brought to us, we're going to change the laws. Even though, like we didn't vote you in to change those laws. You didn't pass us any type of a questionnaire even to see if we wanted this.
Well, you have to ask yourself, should there be change, and do I want to be an instrument of it? And the power will come from people who marched down Yonge Street just in 1837 as demonstration. There needs to be change, and we're going to do it.
Well, I would hope so because once again, I mean, and we just covered, I would say, what's the expression? You covered just the top, or just I guess
The superficial there?
I guess we could say that, or just the term being we covered just the what is it? Just the crux of it? Is that the term?
Okay.
We just and I just wanted to cover that because my concern was again as a POW, because I did work in as a peer support worker with young people who were addicts, homeless. I say maybe exile because even if I did want to continue life the way it was before, I have no choice to even, depending on what field I go in, which is now health, let's say, and whatnot, health and addiction, they're not forcing you that you have to um, be indoctrinated, if I can use that word, but it's required. So if I wanted to go back and work with health, which I was doing for well into and even before wearing hazmat suit and everything, I still have to get 3 indoctrinations, they're telling me, in order to still re-enter that force. And I feel there's a lot of Canadians out there. And this, once again, on the anniversary of what happened with the truckers and everything else, what are we going to do? Because that's what the world I'm living in right now. And I can only imagine, in conclusion, it must be very difficult, even though not intentional, but that indirect collusion of the folks who work in these industries, right? Because even though there's a lot of ego and no one wants to admit they're right or wrong, it's still there's still some collusion, whether that collusion was created by mass hypnosis or a Project Bloombeam or blocking the sun enough, right? It's still never enough to bring us back to the world that we had once when I was growing up as a kid, a Gen Xer in Canada, and you too. So, Arthur, take it away before we wrap up.
There was one thought I had read many years ago as far as people who are being suppressed or ostracized or minority. It's not those people who necessarily make the change. It's the other people who saying, maybe they have a real perspective. And so it's the other people who in fact are the instruments of change. They have been alerted by the suppressed, but it's the majorities who are outspoken who say maybe they have a point.
It's going to take a bit because my biggest, hardest reality about, and I feel the country across is not aware, even though 3 years later to this date, March, when this whole thing happened, this whole uh, cosmic, twilight world of everything that we've lived through, lockdowns, deaths, et cetera. I just hope at some point, maybe with another government, I don't know if it goes. And once again, I can't say it's either left or right, conservative, liberal. I just hope that we do have a system where our laws cannot be so uh, hijacked the way I believe it has been in the last 3 years. I can only hope that we could bring back some type of, for a better word, morality to it all. Because right now, as far as I see, as what we're living, it's not over yet. And the only reason why this broadcast is here is only because, once again, it's been 3 years. Seems like it's back to normal. There's no more ticker on your television screen showing you how many people died of C-19, and the fear is toned down. But we're not out of the clouds, because maybe one day a family compact can come back, which they're ready to do. Say, hey, we got something else. Get indoctrinated again. That's my thoughts. So that was the day. Anything else? One more.
That's basically it. The fight continues, and the war continues to be won.
Yes. And here's to that.
Be careful out there. That arm is unstable. Not sure how long it's gonna hold. There's warning lights everywhere. Abort! Abort!